Perfect. All right. So today we are going to talk about the last prevention code of ethics, which is ethical obligations for community and society. And I have you answering a question here about what does talking the talk and walking the walk mean to you, and how does it apply to our work as prevention professionals? So a few of our responses that we have gotten thus far are: do what you say, live out what we tell others. As I promote healthier behavioral choices, I should also be modeling the same behavior. Thank you. It means to follow what you yourself are preaching and believe in. Do not just expect others to do it, and you are not absolved from it. This applies to prevention ethics and all the things we are learning. Giving credit where credit is due, do no harm, etc. Thank you. Doing as you say, following through, being a professional at all times with integrity and character. I believe this applies to both personal and professional. Thank you. And the last response that I see is doing what you are teaching others to do. This means that you need to be a role model, especially when working with youth. It is important you show them how to make good choices. Thank you so much for your responses on that. So as you can see from some of the things that you responded, the ethical obligations principle really calls us to action in many ways. We want to prevent the risks associated with substance use, and we want to promote that health and well-being, which means that we need to do this during our work hours and outside of our work hours. And so we're going to keep this in mind as we explore the meaning and the expectations in this particular principle. So again, you should know the routine. Pull out the sheet that has all the summary of the different principles on it, the Prevention Think Tank Code of Ethical Conduct. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this last principle to you, and as I do that, underline some of those key words that kind of jump out to you about what this principle means. So according to their consciences, oh my goodness, prevention professionals should be proactive on public policy and legislative issues. The public welfare and the individual's right to services and personal wellness should guide the effort of prevention professionals to educate the general public and policymakers. Prevention professionals should adopt a personal and professional stance that promotes health. Okay, so was there anything that kind of jumped out at you on that, a key word or two? Chat it in the chat box. While you're chatting that, what I'd like to point out is, you know, this sounds like it should be an easy enough kind of thing, but, you know, here in Watertown, what we found is, you know, we've really looked at wanting to maybe change the policy, the substance abuse policy at the school district level. Just maybe tweak it a little more. We feel like there's a lot of gaps and misunderstandings, and it just needs to be cleaned up potentially. But it's a really tough one. It's a tough one to touch because you have a lot of people who are adamant that it should be a zero tolerance policy. You shouldn't make any exceptions as far as, you know, if you were to go through these prevention classes, then you could, you know, play within 30 days or whatever the case may be. And so a lot of times people can, you know, as prevention professionals trying to advocate for some kind of change, to look at that, you might come into a lot of attack, and sometimes people are just kind of mean, and because they take it to a personal kind of a level. So Fran says this really means keeping ethical in both personal and professional life. Very good. Okay. So advocacy, oh wait a minute, I have to go back one more. There we go. According to this particular principle, prevention practitioners, we are expected to promote health and wellness, both professionally and personally. On the professional level, this will mean advocating for programs, policies, and services that support wellness. And then the next 2 points here are really more on the personal level. So it means striving to really apply those knowledge and the skills that we have because of our prevention professionalism, and applying those to our daily lives to help us to protect the health of others that we come into contact with, whether it's family or friends, acquaintances, and then also to enhance our own well-being. So we're going to look at the first one of advocating for prevention first and foremost here. So advocacy really means taking action to support an idea or a cause. We as prevention professionals, we have an obligation to the communities that we work in and to our society as a whole to advocate for programs and policies and services that really support the wellness that we believe in. So as we are in the field of prevention, advocacy mainly involves educating community members, educating the media, and educating elected officials. And I know that there are some times when we think, ooh, I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole because I feel like people might think it's lobbying. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we want to advocate because we want to raise awareness. I mean, we know what the research is out there. We know the pros and cons of the issues. And so why wouldn't we want to increase that awareness, raise that awareness, and increase understanding about the issues? And by doing that, by educating people, we're hoping to, mobilize that support with the goal of creating some positive change. Is there any other reasons that you can think of that we would want to advocate for programs, policies, and services surrounding the areas of wellness, besides raising awareness and increasing that understanding and in mobilizing for support? Can you think of any other reasons? Yeah, good. Be a voice for those who are unheard. Absolutely. T-set, good. So when we're looking at advocacy, we know there are some agencies, and what you will want to do is go to your agency and see, do you have guidelines set forth in your policies in regards to advocacy? Because before starting any advocacy efforts, it's important to know and understand what those guidelines are that might exist in your organization, because you don't want to, break any of those rules or policies that might be set forth for you. So let's click here. So what I would like to do is I'm going to ask a series of questions here. And I want you to think about, have you ever done any of these? Have you ever discussed a prevention issue in public? Okay. Or have you ever provided information on a prevention issue? Have you ever responded to a public official's request for information or testimony? Have you ever explained prevention-related laws or policies? And have you ever created prevention-related fact sheets? So thinking about those questions, I'm sure that each of us have done one of these things, okay? So what's an example of something that you have done in regards to any of these questions that I just asked you? Chat that in the chat box, please. Give us an example. What was an issue that you discussed in public? Or what was the topic area? Or was there a certain piece of legislation that you were educating on? Okay, so Fran, multi-unit housing summits for property managers and landlords, vaping restrictions in public places, good. Dee has done some work on suicide, good. Any others? Information to family and friends on marijuana use, yeah. And I feel like the marijuana use topic is, it's a hot topic. You look online and most of the stuff out there is all about the, pro-legalization and things like that. And, I feel like if you start to educate on some of those issues, and if you're doing it online, those people get attacked like crazy. A quick story, when I was just starting, I was probably a couple years into this position, and I had gone to a conference over in Minnesota, the Minnesota Program Sharing Conference, I believe it was, and drugwatch.org was a website, or was a company too, that had produced some information about, what were some of the cons of legalizing hemp at that time. And I thought, I'm just going to take this information and I'm going to make it into a newspaper article just to, start this conversation. And let me tell you, this was before social media. This was when, internet email was just starting to really get big. And so I wrote this article, and the South Dakota NORML president, I think his name was maybe Bob Newland, he put my article out on his network, and I received the nastiest letters, the nastiest emails ever. And so, sometimes when you're educating on some topics like that, you kind of put yourself out there to be criticized in public. So anyway. All right. So thanks for those examples that you guys gave. So, I talked about how sometimes we fear the whole advocacy piece because we are fearful of the lobbying issue that comes up. And so lobbying is a type of advocacy, and it attempts to influence specific legislation. So I think that is the key right there, is that if you are working to influence specific legislation, like for example, when Joyce Glynn was trying to get the social host law passed, I remember, I think Melinda from Southeast Prevention Resource Center, we both took a vacation day, the day that she was going to be presenting to committee, because we wanted to be there to support her, but we also didn't want to be seen like we were lobbying on work time. So that was our choice. We took the day. We didn't even really say anything, but because we had to sign in at this committee meeting, we just did that. But anyway, so because we were looking at that specific piece of legislation, we wanted them to pass the social host law. Okay. So if our state was considering enacting laws that would limit youth access to alcohol, kind of like the social host law, any action to communicate that with elected officials or staff could, in an effort to influence these laws, could be considered lobbying. Okay. But educating the public and or legislators on a specific issue is not considered lobbying. So let's say that there is a piece of legislation out there like the social host law. If we wanted to provide some information about what are some of the pros of this, or what maybe are some of the cons of something, with the data or with research that we have found, if we're just doing educating and not saying vote yes or vote that, just doing educating on what it would be so they could make an educated vote themselves, that would be considered advocacy and not lobbying. Okay. All right, so according to the US law, educational and nonprofit organizations, which is what I work for, we could be at risk of losing our tax exempt status if a substantial part of the work activities do involve lobbying. So for this reason, it's best to avoid lobbying in our roles as prevention professionals. And if you are going to do that, you need to make sure that it's okay with the agency that you're working with, and maybe that you have other funding to support that. However, we can check with our funders, as we were talking about just now, and to see what is allowable under the specific grant money or under your agency time. So as we have already discussed, advocacy and education about issues related to substance abuse prevention are highly encouraged. We just need to make sure that we have done our research required to draw the accurate line between advocacy and lobbying in our work as prevention professionals. So the next key concept of ethical obligations principle is we are asked to consider appropriate roles and responsibilities, not only at work, but also outside of work. So I want you to imagine for a moment that you are on a plane 30,000 feet in the air, and the person sitting next to you is a physician. And then suddenly a man 6 rows back or so has a heart attack. The doctor's on vacation. Do you think that she should try to help? I'm guessing most of us are going to say yes. The reason being is because according to the Medical Code of Ethics, it is the physician's ethical responsibility to provide care in a medical emergency even when they are off duty. Okay? So why do you think the doctor, why does the doctor have greater responsibility in the situation than the other passengers? And Michelle, I just muted Chessa, so we're good. So why does the doctor have a greater responsibility than the other passengers here? Because he's ethically obligated, right? Okay, so how do you think that this relates to us as prevention professionals? When do we have an ethical obligation to help protect the health of others? Okay, thank you, Fran. Yep, because of their technical training, the doctor is obligated to help. Yep. So how does being obligated to help or how to protect the health of others, how does that relate to us as prevention professionals, do you think? Or when does it apply? To inform others if incorrect information about prevention matters is shared. Good. Absolutely. It applies on and off the job. Yep, it sure does.
So did you see Fran's?
Oh, no, I missed that one. Because of their technical training, we should be advocating for health prevention all the time. This is our focus. Very good. Yep. So yeah, there are going to be situations when someone's substance-related behavior may be harmful to themselves or others, such as maybe someone getting behind the wheel of a car after drinking. We as a prevention professional have an ethical obligation to intervene. And why wouldn't we want to? Because we know that this could potentially impact the safety of the person who's getting behind the wheel and the safety of others who are on the road, right? And we know the risks of drinking or driving while intoxicated. So we, like the doctor, are held to a higher standard than the other onlookers because we have been educated in those dangers. And so we do need to be that voice. Okay. So the final concept of the ethical obligations for community and society principle is walking the walk of wellness here. So what I did was I created a poll, and I just got to find it here, just one second. Okay, slide 10. And I'm going to launch this poll, and what I want you to do is I want you to check all that apply. To you most days. right, I think that everyone's had a chance to reply, so I'm going to end polling, and I'm going to share the results here. So, as you can see that, maybe some of us were able to, it's hard for me to tell like who, if there was any one of us who was able to click mostly accurate for all of these, but I'm guessing that probably very few of us. As you can see that none of us were able to, we never had an 8 out of 8 people that were able to reply that we do this all the time, right? And so we all work in a health-related field, yet very few of us or none of us were able to say that we are able to do all these different things. So why do you think it's important that we as prevention professionals tend to our own wellness? Why is that important? Why is it important as prevention professionals to tend to our own wellness? Put that in the chat box. So to avoid burnout. Good, thanks, Fran. What else? Yep, people see us as a role model, compassion, fatigue. In order to take care of others, we need to take care of ourselves. Good. Good. So if we know this, why don't we all take all of these actions to support our own health and well-being? What are some of the things that get in the way of that? Thank you, Juanita. Yeah, to do our own wellness plan. So yeah, some of the things that get in the way is life, family, job, single parenthood, work and school. Got a lot of different things pulling us a lot of different directions, right? So I just want to remind you that, when you are on an airplane, the crew always reminds us that in the unlikely event of a cabin depressurization, that oxygen mask will fall. And do they say to put it on your neighbor first? No. They always tell us to secure our own mask first so that we are better able to help those around us. So we need to take care of ourselves first so that we can take care of those others. So just like putting on that oxygen mask in the event of an airplane maybe going down. So as let me just see, I gotta make sure. There we go. As a prevention professional, we are role models. And as such, we need to protect the health and the well-being of others. And part of our ethical obligation is to strive to enhance our own health and wellness, okay? So wellness is that conscious effort. It's a conscious and deliberate process that involves making choices to try to achieve a more healthier and a more satisfying lifestyle. So remember that wheel of wellness that I have up here. We talked about this during the regular SAPS class, right? Where we look at emotional, where we're coping effectively with life and creating those satisfying relationships. Moving around the wheel to financial, we're satisfied with current and future financial situations. Social, we're developing that sense of connection, belonging, and a well-developed support system. Spiritual, we're expanding our sense of purpose and meaning in life. Occupational, personal satisfaction and enrichment derived from our work. Physical, recognizing the need for physical activity, diet, sleep, and nutrition. Intellectual, recognizing creative abilities and finding ways to expand knowledge and skills. And environmental, so we are occupying pleasant, stimulating environments that support well-being. So what I'd like you to do is, in your handout, there's an activity that says enhancing your wellness. And this is probably similar to what we did during SAPS, but we all know that life can change, and so I kind of want to see where you're at. And what I'd like you to do is quickly go down and fill this out. So like, for example, emotional, I cope effectively with life and create satisfying relationships. Would you do usually or usually not? And so fill that out, and then I'm going to pull up another poll here where I want you to go ahead and fill those out, and then so we just can see where everyone's at, so we can kind of, and then you as yourself can identify, where is it that I really need to kind of look at working on. So go ahead and fill that out and then put it up on the poll. And once I get a majority of people that have voted, I will share the results.
I don't see the poll.
Oh, that's because I haven't launched it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I think most of us have responded. So I'm just going to end polling, and I'm going to share results. And so, yeah, as a group, looks like some of them are a little higher than others. For the first one, the emotional, 86% of us usually. Financial, 71% of us are at usually. Social, 86% of us. Spiritual, 100%. That's awesome. Occupational, my work provide. Yep. So 86% of us again. Physical, 71%. So yeah, I feel like during the summer, especially, adequate sleep is an issue for me. Healthy diet, because I'm eating a lot of concession stand food, and physical activity. Try as I might, I try. But and then the last one, or not the last one, intellectual. Ooh, we got 100% there. That's awesome. And also environmental. So very good. So what I would like you to do is write down an action step now. Where do you see that you would like to try to improve on your wellness wheel and enhancing your wellness? And then, because if you write it down, you are more likely to do that, right? And it doesn't have to be that you're going to start it right away tomorrow, but just think about in the next 2 to 4 weeks, how can you enhance your wellness in one of those 8 dimensions where you felt like maybe you could do a little bit better. Oh, see, and then I go too far. Okay. So we've really finished exploring these expectations of ethical obligations for community and society per principle, which includes advocating for prevention, including programs, policies, and services, but making sure that we avoid lobbying as our role of prevention professionals. And I do want to point out that I had sent that attachment out to you this morning. That's an excellent document from CADCA. On, if you have questions, is this lobbying or would this be considered advocacy? And it just has lots of different ideas for you in that document. We've also learned about protecting the health of others, particularly when substance use or abuse is involved, both during and beyond our work hours, and then promoting our own health and wellness. So before we move on to the next one and turn it over to Michelle, what I'd like you to think about is, do you have any questions? And if you do, type it in the chat box. Think about what have you learned or relearned, and then I want you to pull out that other sheet, there it is, called the Ethics and Prevention Action Step. And I want you to think about Principle 6 and what are some action steps that you can do in regards to that particular principle moving forward. So if you do have questions, type it in, write down your action step, and then I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. Michelle, are you going to share your PowerPoint?
Yes, I'm trying to.
Okay, I didn't know.
I'm clicking share, screen share.
Okay, it's coming.
Okay. What do you see?
I see your screen. I see the PowerPoint.
That's it?
With no notes, yep.
Very good. I'm going to pull up my chat and my participants.
Which means I have to do the same. Oh, it's right down here. Dang it.
All right, good afternoon, everybody, on a Friday afternoon. I'm so happy it's the weekend. So we've gone through the 6 principles, and now we are going to talk about ethical decision-making process. And, all of us need to make decisions both in our personal and professional life. And we often approach these decisions in different ways. We all have different ways of making decisions. And so I'm going to read off some ways people make some decisions, and I want you to raise your hand under the participant list. I want you to click your hand if you feel this applies to you, and then go ahead and unclick it, and then I'll read the next one, and so on and so forth. So the first one is, how many of you tend to make decisions based on your gut or emotional reactions? How many of you tend to make decisions based on your gut or emotional reactions? We've got 1. All right. And then you can go ahead and lower your hand again. The next one is, how many of you think through each decision that you face in a thorough and logical way? How many of you think through each decision that you face in a thorough and logical way? Got 2 people for that one. Okay, thank you. You can lower it. How many of you have difficulty making decisions because you see so many possible courses of action? We got 3 on that one, and I'd have to raise my hand for that one as well, too.
Me too.
Thank you. Oh, we got another one. Yep. Thank you. Okay, you can go ahead and put your hands down for that one. I don't know why that just, okay. And then the last one is, how many of you make decisions pretty quickly because the best possible course of action seems very clear? We've got one for that one. All right, you can go ahead and lower your hands. So regardless of our decision-making styles, it is always our intent to make the best decision possible. This is particularly important when ethics are involved. But you know, as I look at this decision-making process we're going to go through, I mean, we're going to talk about it in the ethical sense, but I feel like it really is a good decision-making model when you're trying to make any sort of decisions that are hard for you. I think sometimes I always overanalyze my decisions and I make them almost harder than they really need to be. And so I think a model like this could help us in any of those situations. But when we're looking at acting ethically, it is your responsibility to act in ways that are consistent with the prevention code of ethics that we've gone through. And sometimes this is clear, but it's not always clear. And so this tool, this decision-making process can help us in that situation. And a careful decision-making process can help us respond ethically to challenging situations that we might come across. It can help us feel more comfortable with the decision that we're making because we know we've really gone through this process and thought about it before making the decision. And it can justify our decision to others as needed. So if they are questioning why we came up with that decision, we can kind of talk through how we went through this process to come up with this decision. I don't know why every time I click on my slide, I lose my participant list. So an ethical decision-making process can be most useful when you or a team you work with is faced with an issue or situation where a number of important values that are at stake. So I don't know if you guys remember this because this was way back on Monday, but on Monday we were introduced to Amy and she had to decide whether to apply for a job that her friend was going for. So Amy had to make a difficult choice between two conflicting values, and those were achievement and loyalty. The ethical decision-making process will also be, and so that was, you know, she could have used this ethical decision-making process to decide, weighing out the facts of would it be the best choice for her to apply for that job or not, even though she knew her friend was applying for that same job. And this decision-making process can also be helpful when there seems to be no single best response, or there is a recognized difference of opinion, and or people don't feel good about the circumstance or possible resolution. The process that we're about to present has several steps, and this might feel really natural for those of you who like to fully process through each of your decisions. But for those of you that are more comfortable with making those quick decisions based on instinct or gut feeling, this process may take a little bit longer to get used to. Let's take a look at this process. So the first step we would do, and I would say if you remember back to SAPST, we looked at, of course, the SPIF model, and while this isn't a flower, I think it really mirrors what we went through in that. So the first step is we're going to assess. Once we've been able to assess the situation, we're going to plan what we're going to do. Our next step is we're going to implement that decision that we made. And then the fourth step is we're going to evaluate what we decided to do and was that the best decision for us or not, or what could we have changed for next time. How many of you, by raise of hands, how many of you have taught decision making that are pretty comfortable with this topic? Anybody? No? Okay. Well, chime in if you feel like you have anything to add to what we're saying. This is a basic decision-making process that we're applying specifically to the ethical situation and dilemmas. And like I said before, this probably does look, or hopefully it looks somewhat similar to the SPIF process that we went through in our 4 days together in SAPS. We will explore these steps and how they can help us making ethical decisions as prevention professionals. And by doing this, we're going to start off by looking at a scenario. So in your handouts, you should have a scenario that says, do the right thing. So it's number 1. It should be the handouts right behind this section, ethical decision-making process. Does anybody, will you chat in the chat box if you can't find it, so I know that everybody has it out? Scenario, and it says do the right thing. And it just says page number 1 on it.
For whatever reason, when I was looking in my manual, this scenario was behind another one called the JADA scenario. I don't know if I put it in wrong or if we may have sent it to you in the wrong order. But yeah, it's the one that says do the right thing at the top.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not seeing anybody chatting in that they don't have it, so I'm assuming everyone has it in front of them. So what I want you to do is I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to read through this scenario. Once you've been able to read through the scenario, will you go ahead and raise your hand so I know everybody's had the chance to read through the scenario so we understand what's happening here with Ty. Just a reminder, thank you, Anna. Once you're done reading it, please raise your hand. Once I see most of the hands up, then I'll proceed. I just want to make sure everybody had adequate time to read it. Or if you don't see where you can raise your hand, you can type into the chat box that you've finished. All right, I'm seeing most people have raised their hand. You can go ahead and unraise your hand. Thank you. So I've heard Ty's story a few times, and I think this is I've seen this happen before. Maybe not exactly go down this exact same way, but it is hard when you're implementing a program that, you know, the school's really behind and the community's behind. So Ty is in kind of an interesting situation here based on what his supervisor's telling him in the data. So he needs to go through this decision-making process. And in order to do that, he first needs to assess. And there's 3 things that he's going to assess for. The first one is he needs to identify the problem. The next thing he needs to do is to consider the different factors that could be influential in helping him to understand and resolve that problem. And the final one would be to consult with others who can help inform the decision that he needs to make and the actions to take. So first we need to identify the problem that we're looking at, consider those influential factors that could help us understand and resolve that problem. And the third is consult with others. The first part of assess is identifying the problem. This too involves 3 related tasks. So the first is we need to establish the facts. And remember that facts are objective and unbiased, so not based on personal opinion or perception. And that can be really tough sometimes when we're trying to make a decision and we are feeling some personal feelings about it. Ty could put some personal feeling into that situation, I feel, but you need to really stick to, when you're looking at identifying the problem, remember to look at the facts and be objective and unbiased. The second one is state the problem in one sentence. We'll draw on the facts and use terms that are concrete, specific, and neutral. And the third step to that would be identify the principles involved in the situation using the Prevention Code of Ethics. Okay. So what I want you to do is, I'm going to just tell each person to, a couple of people to take each one of these steps. So for example, I'm going to ask Dee and Carly, if you could just, on your own here, I want you to think about establishing the facts, only the facts, no personal opinions. So when you look at the scenario, do the right thing, what are some facts that you could draw from that reading that you did? And just go ahead and jot those down, and maybe type one or two of those into the chat box after you've been able to establish. What are some facts that Ty needs to take a look at when he's considering this? So I will give you one example. A fact would be doing the right thing has been delivered to thousands of students over the past 8 years. That's a fact. Okay, so what are some other facts that you could come up with? Then Chessa and Emily, I'll have you look at state the problem in one sentence using terms that are concrete, specific, and neutral. So based on what you read out of Ty's scenario, what would be your problem statement? What is Ty's problem? What does he need to decide what to do? And once you've come up with that problem statement, go ahead and type that into the chat box. And then if Fran and Jana and Juanita, if you would select which principle or principles from the Prevention Code of Ethics are involved in this situation and justify your selection. So look at the 6 different principles of ethics and think about which ones you think are in play in this situation and why. So it would be, is it non-discrimination? Is it competency? Is it integrity? Nature of service, confidentiality, or ethical obligations for community and society. So it could be one or more than one of those, and kind of explain why. So we'll give you just a little bit of time to, for each of you to look that over and then type into the chat box. If after doing this you feel like, I don't know, just go ahead and type, I don't know in the chat box. And that's perfectly fine too, and we'll talk through it. So I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. So I see that Dee has responded and Jana has responded. Anybody else? Maybe if you're still working on it, thank you for raising your hand, Dee, to let me know you're finished. If you're still working on it, can you raise your hand so I know to wait? Otherwise, we'll just keep moving forward. Thanks, Chessa. I'll give you a couple more minutes here and then we will keep going. While Chessa's finishing up, I just want to kind of give a recap of what the scenario is because I was notified there's somebody doing this remotely and they don't have the print materials in front of them. And so, you know, Ty is a substance abuse prevention professional and he works in a school. He works for a community prevention agency, but he's working in a school and he's doing a curriculum called Do the Right Thing. They've been doing it for over 8 years and they've been doing it for thousands of students, but 2 studies have recently been published and they both show that there's no, it has no effect at all on teen substance use. In fact, it indicated that it has increased in its implementation has led to an increase in substance abuse in some population, including among the cultural groups represented in this community's high school. So Ty went to his supervisor to tell her that, but she really didn't want him to say anything. She said she had no intention of sharing this new information with anyone at this point. She wanted Ty to keep quiet about the results and to continue to do his work supporting the implementation of this curriculum. And so Ty is really unsure what he should do in this situation. Okay, so the first one we talked about, we just need to establish the facts. And so Dee and Carly were looking at that. And great, Dee says, showing the program has no effect at all on teen substance abuse. That's a fact. And may even create an increase in substance use. Absolutely. And Carly said the program is not effective. Okay. So some other things they said was, some other facts, like I said before, Doing the Right Thing has been delivered to thousands of students over the past 8 years. Another fact is it is popular with school administrators, teachers, parents, and students. There have been 2 large-scale evaluation studies found that the curriculum didn't change student substance use behavior. The studies also show that it actually led to increased substance use in some population, including the cultural groups in Ty's schools. And that's really, Dee and Carly did a great job of pulling those facts out. And the other one was Mary, Ty's supervisor, has no intention of sharing this information with anyone at this point. The second thing we needed to do when assessing was state the problem in 1 sentence, just using factual information again, and asked Chessa or Emily to look at that. And Chessa said, 2 large studies found evidence against the effectiveness of Do the Right Thing curriculum against youth substance use, in which the school is unwilling at this time to stop the curriculum due to funding concerns, time constraints, and management decisions. You really thought through that, Chessa. Thank you. So the example they had here for a statement problem was current research shows that the Do the Right Thing curriculum is ineffective, but Ty's supervisor wants to continue supporting it and not share the results. So I think that's exactly what Tressa said. She just gave a little bit more information to it. So really good job on that. Just, emphasizing the point of the problem statement is the problem statement must be concrete, specific, and most of all neutral. So for example, imagine that two children are fighting over a toy and you ask them what the problem is. They say, he's a jerk, and she says, and she's stupid. Well, that's not really the problem. And that's not exactly neutral. The facts of the problem is that both children wanted the same toy and they're not sure how to make that work. So again, trying to keep out our own biases, but just really stick to those facts in this situation. And Tressa did a very good job of that. The third one that we need to do when we're assessing the problem is identifying the principles. And Fran and Juanita and Jana were looking at that. And I see that Jana put integrity. And yes, they have integrity listed as 1, 2. It conflicts with integrity because deception is involved if Ty and his agency fail to share the evaluation results and continue to support a curriculum that is ineffective. Also, this could undermine the public's confidence in prevention when word get out, which is bound to happen. The second one that she had there was nature of service, and they had that as well. It's not right to continue using a program that doesn't work and that could actually harm some participants. And the third one you had listed was ethical obligations. And I agree with that one. You know, we had an ethical obligation to the community to let them know that this program that was being used was showing ineffectiveness. So I can see that one absolutely. The one they put was competency principle. We are obligated to ensure and improve the quality of service we deliver as prevention professionals, which means using effective evidence-based programs. And based on these studies, this curriculum is not effective. The competency principle also requires Ty to take a stand and do something about the unethical choice Mary has made. Not saying it's going to be an easy choice, but he does have an ethical obligation to do something about this situation. The next thing that we need to do is consider the influential factors. And there's 2 things to look at here. The first would be internal factors. And with the internal factors, this includes your personal perspective, values, and needs that might introduce bias or otherwise affect your decision. So we need to consider those internal factors, and we also need to consider those external factors as well. This could include the perspectives of others involved in parties, including their rights, vulnerabilities, and responsibilities. So when we think back to Ty's story again here about the Do the Right Thing curriculum, what are some of the internal and external factors he should consider as he assesses his problem? Anybody have any thoughts on that? If you do, you can write it into the chat box. So again, what are some of the internal and external factors that Ty should consider as he assesses his problem? Yeah, great. Mary is worried about her own reputation, so value. So that's an external thing he needs to consider is Mary's worried about her reputation. Just says parent perspective. So absolutely, that would be another external thing that we're looking at. What are parents going to, one, they've loved the program. How are they going to feel to know that it's been ineffective and possibly maybe even done more harm than good? Dodie might now believe it is ethical to use an ineffective curriculum.
Might not, sorry.
So that would, he himself might not believe that, right? Yeah. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So that would be an internal factor. He's really struggling with that. because he doesn't, he might now not believe it is ethical to use an ineffective curriculum. Yeah, so that would be an internal problem for him. Great. So very good. Ty's perspective. So for an internal thing for Ty, it might believe that it is right to use an ineffective curriculum, and since he probably values his relationship with the school, parents, and students, he may feel worried about putting these relationships and his professional reputation in jeopardy. In addition, he really does have to worry about Mary as his supervisor and wondering if that's going to jeopardize his relationship with her and his position in the agency as well. Mary and Dee already said this. Mary's concerned about acknowledging that a curriculum the agency has been supporting is not effective for many years. So obviously she's worried about how that will tarnish her professional relationship, reputation, both at the agency and in the school. Another external factor might be that Ty might have to consider is the executive director at the agency. While they might be concerned about fulfilling the agency's contract with its funder, she will likely not want to continue supporting a curriculum that recently shows that it's ineffective. Another external factor to consider is the funder. The funders would likely not want to support a curriculum with such poor evaluation results. And then another external factor, which Chessa spoke to, would be school district parents and students. School staff, parents, and students like the program and assume that it is effective. Ty has direct contact with the schools. They put their trust in him as a professional to help achieve positive outcomes. So a lot of internal and external factors to think about in this situation. And the last thing to assess would be consulting with others. So people with more knowledge about or experience with issues involved. So it's important to consult with those people. If you were about to buy a new car, would you look to your best friend who knows very little about cars for help? Or would you contact a mechanic you trust or consult consumer websites for information and guidance? Maybe we would consult with a friend, but we'd probably also want to consult with, oftentimes when people are looking for a car, they'll drive to the mechanic and have them take a look at it to make sure it all looks okay. Or we do get on the credible site to be able to find out more information and see what reviews people put out there. When faced with an ethical dilemma in your work as prevention professionals, who are some of the people you could look for help when making sound decisions? So when you're trying to make decisions on an ethical dilemma in your prevention work, who are some people that you go to for help, or who are people that you could go to for help? If you wouldn't mind sharing that by chatting that. Thanks, Dodie.
You're welcome.
I do talk to Dodie on probably a daily basis. So, Fran says the board of directors. Yep, great one. Colleagues in the community. 2 other prevention specialists. Dodie says for supervisor, and then Chessa said superintendent. Great. Excellent. A lot of what they had listed as well. Your supervisors, more experienced colleagues in the prevention field. Board of directors, as Fran said, coalition leaders. So if you yourself isn't the coalition leader, you could look to other coalition leaders to bounce it off them to see if maybe they've been in that same situation and how they handled it. Evaluators or other research consultants, legal counsel, or even state prevention agency representatives. So great. It's important to think through that. Who are some people I could trust? Who are some people that could help me? Because sometimes when we're trying to make these decisions and we don't talk it through with anybody, or for me, you kind of get this tunnel vision, and folks who have maybe been through it, or they can just kind of give us a more objective view on it, it can help consult with others. All right, so once we've assessed the situation, we need to plan what we're going to do. So planning begins with brainstorming all possible options for addressing this dilemma, no matter how impractical or unrealistic they may seem. So you've maybe done that before when you're just trying to make a decision in your life and you just write down, you just brainstorm possible options. And some might seem impractical or unrealistic, but you're just simply brainstorming all possible options and writing them down. The next thing we need to look at is eliminating unethical options. So we've brainstormed, wrote all those down, and once we've had that exhaustive list, we need to look at, okay, according to our prevention code of ethics, what are the ones that I should probably eliminate from my options? And finally, we need to consider the remaining options and weigh the pros and cons. So once we've been able to eliminate the ones we think would be unethical, we need to then weigh out the pros and cons to make the best decision that we can. So planning begins with brainstorming all possible options for addressing the dilemma, no matter how impractical or unrealistic they seem. So what do you think are some possible options based on what Ty, we know about Ty here and what he is facing? What does he have? What are his options right now? What could he do? Anybody, go ahead and type that in the chat box. What do you think are some options of what he could do, whether you think it's unrealistic or impractical? Yes, Fran, he could do nothing. Absolutely. That is an option. He says Ty can look into other research first. Isn't this an evidence-based program to begin with? Yes. So right, you're saying that he could look and maybe that research, those two research studies, that's one thing, but maybe he can find some other research to back it up in a different way. Any other options we think he might have? Leak it to the press? Absolutely. He wants to get that information out, but maybe he doesn't want anyone to know that he was the one that got that information out, so he leaks it to the press. Make sure the studies don't have holes in them. All research is not created equal. Yep. Oh, Dodie, we know that's what you would do. That's right. You're just brainstorming all options, even if you think it's unrealistic or not something you would ever do. You're just kind of writing down all possible options here. All right. Well, thank you for sharing. Let's take a look at some of the other ones they talked about. So the very first one they talked about here was exactly what Fran said. His first possible option could be to do nothing at all. He just continues to do what he has always done. He doesn't talk about it ever again and just keeps on keeping on. The next one would be release the evaluation results to the school anonymously. So kind of what Dodie said, not leaking it to the press, but still getting those information to the school, but not letting them know you were the one that gave the information. Suggest that school officials request evaluation results. So, you could go to school administration and say, I saw some results. I don't know that I can give them to you, but I would suggest that you request them so that you can see what the results said. He could quit his job to avoid dealing with the situation. He's worried. He doesn't want to continue doing the program because he feels it's unethical, but he's worried to do anything about it because he feels it's going to hinder his relationship with Mary and ultimately might lose his job anyway, so he's just maybe going to quit. And the last one would be tell executive director about this dilemma. All right. So I think, Dodie, did you create a poll here? What I want you to do is I want you to pick the two that you think that we need to eliminate that would be unethical options here. So that's the next step that we need to do in that planning process. Once we brainstorm all our possible options, we need to eliminate unethical options. So go ahead and pick the two that you think would be unethical. We'll give you a couple minutes to do that. Once Dodie sees most people have done that, then she'll pull up the results for us. While some options may seem better or even more ethical than others, there are two on the list that are clearly unethical. So what two are they? How many do you have, Dodie?
6 of 8. So I'll
Okay.
end it and I'll share. There you go.
So the blue means what?
No. So 50% said do nothing, 50% said release.
Okay. 17%. Okay, that's just smaller number.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. All right, so we're kind of all over the board. So the two that would be unethical would be do nothing. And this is why. Because we know that allowing something unethical to happen without responding in some way is considered unethical, just as though we actually did something unethical ourselves. Do you remember from our introduction what it's called when somebody fails to take action when they see something unethical happening? So remember, we had commission and then we had omission. And that, according to the competency principle in the Prevention Code of Ethics, we cannot ignore the fact that someone else is acting unethically. Ty can't do nothing and he can't quit his job. Ty has to take action. So it would be do nothing and quit my job to avoid dealing with the situation. Because in both of those situations, he's choosing to do nothing about it. He sees something unethical is happening, but chooses to do nothing about it. Any comments about that? Thanks, Dodie. You can end that. Oh, Chessa wasn't seeing the poll. I'm sorry, Chessa. Anything you want to add to what was shared there? Or did you have any other thoughts on that? That's weird. Okay. All right, so now that we've crossed off the two that would be considered unethical, Ty is left with 3 final options. And so then once he has these, he has to take a look at what are the pros and cons so he has to look at the pros and cons of each one. So the first one is to release the evaluation results anonymously to the school community. So for example, some pros to that might be sharing the evaluation results would put the research in the hands of the school so they could decide themselves what they want to do. Some cons would be leaking the results seem to conflict with Ty's personal values. As reflected in the case example, he values honesty. It could damage his professional reputation as trustworthy if people at his agency or school officials find out that he leaked this information rather than approaching the problem openly and honestly. How about the second one there? Suggest that school officials request evaluation results. What do you see as some of the pros and cons to that one? Anybody have thoughts on that one? What would be a pro or con to that one? Oops. Suggest the school officials request evaluation results. They may not take it in the right way or interpret things wrong, blindsided. Thanks, Dee. Potential conflicts. A couple of cons to it, yep. A pro, thank you both for sharing, Emily and Dee. They say a pro is sharing the evaluation results would put the research in the hands of the school so they could decide themselves what they want to do. But cons, kind of what you both spoke to here, Dee and Emily, would be one, the school officials will probably want Ty to tell them what the results show, and he will have to avoid doing this, which could be kind of awkward. Ty also knows that once they see the results, they're going to be displeased and probably approach Mary. Mary will be angry that Ty told the school about the research, and this could jeopardize their working relationship. The third option that Ty has there is tell executive director about the dilemma. So some pros with that would be Ty tells the executive director about the situation. She'll have the results and will be responsible for deciding what to do, and Ty will feel that he has acted ethically. The con would be that the executive director will undoubtedly approach Mary, which will make Mary angry with Ty for going over her head, which could jeopardize their working relationship. All right. So once he's gone through those pros and cons of his options, then he needs to implement. He needs to make that decision. So selecting the option you believe is the most ethical and appropriate course of action. And sometimes that's not always one. He has more than one option there. And because we've unlimited the unethical ones, that's the tough thing about making decisions, right? That there's not always just one this right decision. Sometimes I know my dad sometimes would say, Michelle, you just got to make the decision and just go with it. And then you can reevaluate it later, right? Maybe I could have done it different, or how did that turn out? But you've just ultimately got to make that decision. And then you're going to carry out the decision, figuring out what you need to do to act on your decision, like coming up with a list of action steps and completing them to carry out your decision. Right. So which decision would you have made? How about raise your hand when I read the one that you would have made? Would you have released the evaluation results anonymously to the school community? Would have anybody have done that one? Not seeing anybody. How about, would you have suggested that school officials request the evaluation results from the agency? Would anybody have done that one? How about told your executive director about the dilemma? Tessa, Carly, Dana, thank you. Great. So while the pros and cons, including potential consequences, differ for each of these options, Ty could have made any of these decisions. The important point is that he had to take action in the face of unethical behavior in his workplace, and he needed to make sure that his decision was grounded in the Prevention Code of Ethics. I will have to say, when we did it online and they actually showed us this video clip, Ty does decide to tell the executive director. He felt much better about it. Mary was initially mad at him, and he knew that was going to hamper their relationship, but he just kind of said to another coworker that he had confided in about this ethical dilemma he had, you know, she'll get over it. Like, he felt good that he had done the right thing, even though it was making the relationship with Mary a little bit rocky. So once he's made that decision, or we've made that decision, then we need to reflect on that decision. We need to evaluate. That's our final step. So once the decision's been carried out, it's important to take the time to reflect on it. People often overlook this step, but this is actually where a lot of real learning happens. So specifically ask yourself these questions when we're looking at evaluation. What was the outcome of the decision? What worked well? What would you do differently next time? And should anything more be done? And based on the group's decision about what Ty should do in this situation, and I saw 4 people raise their hand that you felt that Ty should tell the executive director about the dilemma. I shouldn't have told you this, because now it says, how do you think things would work out for him? Any other thoughts you had to that of how you think, if that was the decision Ty made, how that might have worked out for him? And I'll take it a step further. Do you think he will need to do anything else to fully resolve his ethical dilemma? So he took it to the executive director, but do you think there's anything else he needs to do to resolve his ethical dilemma? Or do you think once he's told the executive director he's done what he needs to do and that's it? Anybody have thoughts on either of those?
Well, the thought that comes to my mind is, you know, if he talks to his executive director and he or she's not really on the same page as him,
Yeah.
he's still in an ethical dilemma.
Right.
You know?
Yep. So then he might have to go back to his options again.
Mm-hmm.
And decide, well, I guess I am going to tell this, you know, I'm going to leak the information, or really encourage the school to contact, you know, to get the information themselves. Because he still needs that, he's still in that position where he needs to do something to make sure that they don't continue to do a program that's not effective. It would be unethical. So, yep. Maybe stay in touch with the director, Emily says. Fran said he needs to speak with his colleagues so they can understand why he did what he did. Review his options for ethical decision making. Great point. Yep, excellent. So I don't feel like he was just, I'm going to throw Mary, I'm going to throw you under the bus. But I went through this decision making process. I didn't make this decision lightly, but based on my ethical codes of ethics, principles, I needed to take action on this. So great point. Excellent. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dodie, and she just has a couple more slides and activity to do with you to kind of tie this all together.
Okay, so you're going to continue to run this, right?
Yes. Do you want me to bring them all up or just the?
Okay. Sure. Yeah. Then I can just talk to it. So let's just take a moment to review what Michelle just walked us through. You know, it really is interesting how it does kind of follow the SPIF planning process. And so, you know, if you can't remember one, you can remember the other, and it can help you to make decisions, whether it's ethical or whether it's just trying to plan a prevention program or plan a prevention strategy. So when we're looking at assess, we want to first identify the problem, making it a neutral problem, right? Not making sure that there's, you know, she's stupid, he's stupid, that kind of a thing, but what is the actual problem? We want to consider what are those influential factors of the problem, and we want to, you know, consult with others, see what others have done, figure out what their thoughts are, that kind of a thing. And then after you do that assessment, after you figure out what is going on, you need to do some planning. You need to brainstorm those possible options. You need to eliminate the unethical options. So always going back to those principles of ethics here for prevention ethics. And then we need to consider those remaining options, okay? And then once we figure out, okay, this is the step that I need to take, we need to implement. We need to make that decision and carry out that decision. And then evaluate. After you've carried out that decision, was it the right one? And figure out what would you have maybe done differently. So this decision-making process can really help us to act in ways that are consistent with the Prevention Code of Ethics that we've been going over with those 6 principles. We can use this decision-making process when we are facing an ethical dilemma, or when we are in a situation where our values compete, or when they're in conflict. So we need to remember that in every situation, there may be many possible courses of action, like we saw in 5P. Doing nothing is always an option, but in the rare cases, is it the most ethical option? And there's also always more options than those that first come to mind. So we need to really make sure we take time to explore the different courses of action and determine which might be the most appropriate and the most ethical given the unique circumstances of every situation. Okay. So what I would like you to do now is I want you to find in your handouts the activity that says small group activity, applying the decision-making process, JADA scenario. And luckily, this is a short scenario, so I am going to read it because we do have 1 or 2 people who don't have the print materials in front of them just because they're working remotely. So I would like for everyone to find that, because we're going to work through this, and I want you to be, you know, you're going to have to be writing things down. So here is the scenario. Jada is a prevention specialist and mother. One Saturday afternoon, her 8-year-old daughter invites a school friend over to play. The friends have a great time together. When Michael, the friend's father, arrives to drive his child home, Jada notices that he is visibly drunk. This is the first time that Jada and Michael have met, and the first time their children have played together outside of school. what, if anything, should Jada do? All right, so the first thing we want to do is we want to identify the problem. And so first of all, we want to list the facts. So type in the chat box, what do you think are the facts of this scenario? And remember, we want to keep them objective and unbiased, not based on personal opinion. Okay, so we have he appears drunk. He's been drinking. Dad has been drinking and now is going to be driving. Okay. The person is intoxicated. Good. Okay, yeah, so some of the ones that we have is, so Jada does see that there are visible signs, right, that Michael is under the influence of alcohol. That's one thing, one fact. He does indeed plan to drive himself and his child home from Jada's house. And probably the third fact that nobody's mentioned and maybe didn't even think about is the fact that Jada and Michael have just met. Okay. So Fran, what is the definition of visibly drunk? Well, I would say that you can tell that he's under the influence and he shouldn't be driving. So maybe he might be slurring his words, or maybe he might be staggering. Maybe he could smell of alcohol, would be my guess. Okay. And then one more fact that we have listed here is that
I just want to say something. You know, Dee said he might be sick and not drunk, and Grant's a good point. And I think that's why you have to maybe you have to ask some further questions then to find out. But I would guess what Dodie said is she could smell it on him. But anytime you think the child's life might be in danger for them to ride with them, you could say, you know, when you're out tonight, have you been drinking, or do you have a medical condition? But you can't, I mean, you have an ethical obligation to do something for this child. To her, it seemed that it was obvious that he was intoxicated, but maybe it's something else, but you have to do something.
Okay. Okay. So we have that written down, right? So then we want to state the problem in one sentence using concrete, specific, and neutral terms. So come up with a sentence, a problem statement, so to speak. Using some of the facts that we even came up with. State the problem in one sentence using concrete, specific, and neutral terms. Anyone want to give it a shot? Michael appears to have had alcohol. An intoxicated individual that Jada knows has arrived to transport her home. Okay. Child may be in danger and something more needs to be done. Okay. Yeah, so any of those might work. The example that I have is that Michael, who is visibly impaired, plans to drive himself and his child home, and Jada must decide whether, and if so, how she should intervene. Okay. So the next thing we want to look at is what are the principles under the Code of Ethics involved in this situation? What is our ethical dilemma here? Which principle does it fall under? Do you think it's non-discrimination, competence, integrity, nature of services, confidentiality, or ethical obligations for community and society? What do you think? Which one of those? Yeah, the ethical obligations. Good. You probably didn't really know what I was asking for there, so thank you. All right, so the next thing we want to do is consider those influential factors. So what are some of those internal factors that might impact Jada's perspective or affect her making the decision? So it could be, what is her perspective? What are her values? What are her needs? So what are some of those internal factors that might influence her decision or impact her decision? Okay, she's a parent. Michael is her father. Yep. Yeah, I got that. It's the child's father, got it. How far does the father have to drive? Can the child stay overnight? He may react unpleasantly. Okay. So some of the options that I have listed is for internal factors that might impact her decision would be, because of her training, Jada does recognize signs and symptoms of alcohol impairment. And also because of her training, she knows the laws and the risks associated with driving under the influence. She is concerned about the safety of the child, the safety of her father and the others on the road. And she is uncomfortable with the prospect of confronting Michael, whom she has just met. Like, how is he going to react, right? Right, Dee? All right, so now let's look at what are some of those external factors that might affect Jada's decision. So things to think about would be the perspective of others involved, including their rights, their vulnerabilities, and responsibilities. So what are some external factors that might affect Jada's decision? Making a scene in the neighborhood, yep. Other things. Upsetting the father, yeah. How is he going to react? If she's busy herself, right? Yeah. Upsetting the child and the father, yep. The father starts to make a big scene, then is that going to upset the 8-year-old daughter? Absolutely. So some other examples might be that Michael does not seem to have any concerns about driving himself and his child home. He thinks he's just fine, right? It's likely that, he's walking up to the door, he's not going to be expecting any confrontation or any kind of intervention of any kind, right? So it might catch him totally off guard. We also know that Michael's daughter is vulnerable in this situation and likely to be incapable of intervening on her own behalf. And Jada's daughter is a witness to the situation, and so she too is looking to her mom to be that role model. So if she could smell the alcohol on his breath or could see that he was staggering and not able to walk in a straight line, that kind of a thing, he might wonder, well, why is my mom letting her go with him when clearly something is not right, right? And then one more thing is that others on the road, we expect fellow drivers to be safe and unimpaired, and they have the right to drive without the risk of impaired driving. We all have that right. Okay. So the next thing we're going to look at under assessing the needs is to consult with others. So list the people with relevant knowledge or experience with whom Jada may want to talk to. Well, quite honestly, when you're looking at this, how is that going to happen? This is kind of an in the moment kind of a thing, right? So there's really no time for Jada to consult with others on this issue before making a decision or taking action. While that would be nice, it's just not realistic. But what she might want to do is think about whether or not she or anyone she knows has had to deal with an impaired driver or an impaired person wanting to drive in the past, and were there any lessons that she learned from that experience, and kind of take those lessons into how she approaches Michael. Okay, so we've assessed the needs, right? Now we want to move into the planning piece. So what do you guys think might be we're going to brainstorm some possible options. What do you think that Jada should do? Okay, invite him into the house for a cup of coffee or water. Ask the father to come in for water, okay. But then what? So you ask him to come in for water and then what? Because I understand what you're trying to do. You're trying to kind of ease him into, I need to have this conversation, but what are you going to say? What are you going to say or do then after he's had his glass of water and says, oop, I got to go? Okay, talk and sit down and visit, okay. Okay, talk to him, see if he slurs his speech. Let's just say he's already slurring his speech. Then what? What are you going to do? Because you don't think that he should be driving. Okay, ask the father if he is okay to drive. Okay, just ask him point blank. And if he says yes, but you can see that it's not, then what? So let's take a couple of what we've already come up with and think about what are the pros and the cons of that. And Fran says, talk about the kids' afternoon, stall the man to see if he's truly intoxicated, offer to keep the kids overnight. Okay. So let's say that he truly is intoxicated. Let's take that one. And you do offer to keep the kids overnight. Are you still going to let him get on in the car and drive? Okay, offer to drive him home.
He said, personally, I would call the police if he took off driving. If he's not drunk, then no harm done.
Okay. Call an Uber. Yeah. Do you have those in Redfield, Jessa? Or call someone. Yeah, like Juanita says, call someone. Okay, good. So if we offer to keep him overnight, her overnight, the con is that Michael is still driving, which poses a danger to himself and others on the road. So what we're also offering to do is call an Uber, call a taxi, call whatever. If he then becomes adamant, no, you're not going to do that, and gets in the car to drive, then ultimately you probably have to call the police to get law enforcement involved, right? So are there any other options as far as what we could potentially do? What were some of the other ones I came up with? Let's see, I'm just going to scroll up here because I can't see them all.
Just ask the father if he's okay to drive.
Okay, so let's say we ask the father if he's okay to drive. What are some of the pros of doing that? If he says absolutely yes. In a slurred voice that reeks of alcohol. Do they live within walking distance? Leave their car at your house and walk home. Okay, that's another good option. Confront him gently. Yes. So I'm kind of even thinking, you're thinking, you know, ask him in for some water or some coffee, because this is the first time you guys have met as parents. So it's kind of like a non-confrontive manner, just want to talk. And then as the conversation goes on, you're thinking you could maybe say, I'm kind of concerned about maybe you've had a little too much to drink to, you know, drive your daughter home. I just, you know, your daughter's an awesome person and I don't want to see you or her get hurt. So, you know, how can we get you home safely or something like that? Okay. Kind of using some of those mental health first aid skills that we teach, right, Michelle? All right, so what you'd want to do is, oh, that's okay. So what you'd want to do is eliminate any unethical options that are going through your mind. You know, you might be thinking, maybe she's thinking, well, I could let him go and just call the cops after he leaves to have them check on him. You know, things like that. I could share my concerns with him, and if he might start to act out of control, or I might, maybe I want to stall Michael and call the police to intervene. So you ask him in for water and say, I just need to run into the other room second, call 911 and have them come. That might be an option that she might be thinking about. You know, and so kind of weighing those pros and cons. But the thing is that you don't have a lot of time here, right? Dee says, I can drive you both home or I can call the fuzz, your choice. Absolutely. And, you know, being under the influence, so you don't know how he's going to react. You're just going to have to hope that he's going to say, okay, yep, I get it. Maybe I have had too much to drink, you know, pointing out what you're noticing about him. All right, so then the next thing we want to do is we want to make the decision in our ethical dilemma here. This decision that we're making in a situation like this might need to unfold and really involve several steps, because it's going to depend on how he responds in your efforts to resolve this situation. So like we've been talking about, Jada might want to begin by expressing her concerns and trying to find a safe way home for Michael and his daughter. And if that doesn't work, she could at least try to keep Michael's daughter out of the car and contact the police to intervene if Michael is determined to drive while under the influence. Okay. And then the next one is justify our recommendation or carry out the decision. And so what that might look like is that, you know, we're going to share our concerns with Michael. We're going to try to talk to Michael to figure out a safe way home for himself and his daughter. And again, contact the police as needed. So then we're going to evaluate. We're going to reflect on the decision. What are some of the outcomes that you might expect if Jada goes through with the recommendation? Which one were we going with again? Bring him in the home and then offer to give him a ride home. What if we were to? What do you think? What can we expect as an outcome if we offer to give him and her a ride home? Are we keeping them safe? Would that be an outcome? Yeah, we're keeping him safe. We're preventing him from drinking and driving, and we hopefully won't have to get those law enforcement involved. And then it says to list any other actions you think Jada might need to fully resolve her dilemma. So it might be that she might need to follow up with Michael, a family member, or proper authorities to ensure that Michael gets the help he needs for if he does have a substance abuse problem, and make sure that they are being safe and the well-being of the daughter in the future, kind of a thing. You know, maybe it was a one-time deal, or maybe there is an issue with substance abuse. You don't really know because this is the first time that they've met. Might want to follow up with a family member if possible to make other travel arrangements for Michael's future play dates if this is an issue, and consider lessons learned from this experience. Have a plan if this were to happen. You know, now that we've put this into your mind, you know, how can you can be thinking about, gosh, what if this were to happen, really were to happen? Because I think that this is a realistic scenario, quite honestly. And so how could you handle that? Tessa says, don't let her daughter go over to their house or be put in a position to drive with Michael. Absolutely. That's a great observation, Chessa. One that I would, I've probably even lived that, just as far as my kids go, knowing some of the parents and their use of alcohol, knowing that I wouldn't want to put my kids into that, even into being unsupervised in their home, because I know that they're likely to be down at the bar or something like that. Okay. Good deal. So can you see how this ethical decision-making process can be so helpful? And the fact that you're tying it back to the principle that you're feeling is kind of in question when you're going through a scenario. Any thoughts or questions on that one? So there were like 2 other ones that are in your handout section. One was about a task force, and the other one, I can't remember off the top of my head. I would encourage you to kind of go through that. You know, read the scenario that they have, and then walk through the whole decision-making process for that scenario. And then if you want to, even if you get through it and you're like, I wonder how I did, send it our way and we can help you to assess that as well with some ideas. Okay. So yeah, do you have any questions about this process? Or my next question is, what do you see as some of the benefits of using this process? Type that in the chat box. What are some of the benefits of using this process? Yeah, it keeps the opinions out to a minimum. It helps with good, solid decisions. It's a life skill that everyone should do with any problems, absolutely. There's factual reactions. A lot of times we tend to get, you know, caught up in the opinions or the judgments, I guess you would say. You're sticking to the facts, using some factual reactions. Good. Well, and actually factual reactions, but also it helps us to think, what is the factual issue, right? Yeah. Make sure the decisions are ethical and not driven by emotions. Good. The other thing that I'd like to think about is the fact that it reminds us to seek advice, or even, you know, reach out to others to talk through what's going on. Yeah, and it is culturally competent. Good. It helps to keep us ethical. Good. And then it also reminds us to use those principles in the Prevention Code of Ethics to help guide us in our decision-making process as well. Okay. So why base decisions on the Prevention Code of Ethics? You know, it's both helpful and important to base decisions as in the field of prevention on the 6 principles that comprise of the Prevention Code of Ethics. In all situations, we are ethically obligated to make decisions based on these principles, And in some situations, we're even legally obligated to do that as well. When we are faced with challenging situations, we don't always have to wing it or guess how to respond, right? And so this helps us to, with the foundation of making and, if necessary, defending difficult decisions, right? So with that, Michelle, if you want to go to the next one. We have given you a lot of information. And so what I would like to do is kind of go back to, I have these written out here, to if this training met your expectations. So some of the expectations you chatted at the beginning of Monday was you want to have a model to use in most situations. I think we did that. You want to gain better understanding of ethics and prevention and how to apply it in situations. Again, we've done that. Have a better understanding of how to provide services ethically, especially learning how to act in different situations. And then how to apply ethics in difficult situations again. So I hope that we addressed each of the expectations that you set up for us at the beginning. If not, let us know and we will help you through. I think we've also been able to, define ethics related terms. We have described the 6 principles. Again, there is a lot of information on those, and I want to actually point out, go to the next slide. I want to point out some of the different resources in the back. So because we mailed these to you, it's really hard for me to know because we didn't have it set up for you, like we would have if we would have just handed you a.
Dodie, we can't hear you.
How we would have just handed you a binder face-to-face if we were a face-to-face class. So I don't know how your binder is set up for what we gave you. But there's a section of resources in the back that I want to point out to you. And so when you look under each of, there's a handout called Resources and Links. And so under each of the principles that Michelle and I went through, there are a lot of websites listed. So if you still have questions, or if you just want further information under each of the different principles, there are things outlined in that handout for you. And then there's a couple more documents after that, and that is an ethics in action worksheet. And I believe you have scenarios that you can read through and answer those questions, but then I believe we also sent the answers with them. So I'd encourage you to do that as well, because it goes through, it has principle 1, some scenarios and how you would answer that, and then there's actual answers and as to why as well. So are there any final questions before we end? This is what each of you are doing right now because it's 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon and you're all heading out the door as soon as we end, I bet. So one last thing, we are going to be sending out an evaluation via SurveyMonkey. I would ask you to answer that honestly so that we can have feedback for how to make this class better in the future. And then I'll also be sending out evaluations. And so if you have some makeup webinars and you want to make sure those hours are on your evaluation, shoot me an email and let me know if you're still working on that, okay? And then for those of you who signed up for a class, I will be working on getting that all posted as well. So thank you all. Have a great weekend.